We are going to talk about a really challenging question today. And that question, ladies and gentlemen, is what have you been doing during COVID? So, what have you been doing during COVID? This question is about a few different things. We've all been through a massively transformational year, and all of us have changed in some way, both personally and professionally. And the reason this is challenging, I think, is twofold. The first is the emotional tie-up of this question. COVID has been an emotional journey for 7 billion people on Earth, and each one of us thinks it's been most emotional for us. And so figuring out how to bring the human side of the emotions that have happened over the last year to the professional setting of an interview is a tricky balance. And the second reason it's tough is because for all of us who have been unemployed for all of or part of the last year, there's a lot of professional stigma and questions aligned with that as well. How do you talk about what you've done? How do you talk about what you haven't done? How do you recognize the fact that the concerns on the other person's side in their minds might be, ooh, this person's been unemployed for 4 or 8 or 12 or 14 months. What have they been doing? But even more importantly, I think, is how do you figure out those concerns in your own mind of, shoot, well, I bet this person's thinking about how I've been unemployed for 4 or 8 or 12 months. How do I talk about that? So that's why this question is so tricky. But I also believe that it is one of the most interesting questions because it shows a ton about a person's character and about their prioritization. So when we're talking about what have you been doing during COVID or any version of a question similar to it, they're asking you this question for 3 reasons. The first, they're looking for a reason to say no. And we're going to talk about that because that's an important one. The second, they're looking to understand if you're motivated and if you can prioritize, because motivation and prioritization are 2 huge challenges for any professional life and also those that have been reflected during COVID. And the third is what brought you here today. Why are you here at this company, at this interview for this role, considering all the things you've done over the last year? What has led you here? So let's talk about the first one. Let's talk about, will you give them a reason to say no? This is where the emotions come in. COVID has been tough, and some of us have had it worse than others. Some people lost family members and friends. Some people were very sick themselves. Some people lost jobs and have financial insecurity. Some people were stuck alone in a home. People had it really tough. But I want to say this is not the place to talk about the deep emotions that we've undergone over the last year. Why? For 2 reasons. The first is we've got to stay focused on the professional aspect of this. You're not talking to a therapist and you're not talking to a friend. You're talking to somebody who wants to know if you're going to be good at their job. And the emotional and personal challenges that you've undergone, however much they've helped shape you or they've been important to you and your family, they are not relevant to the role. And you've got to resist the urge to talk too deeply about those emotional challenges. The second reason it's really tough is because when we're talking about all the things that you could be doing, I want to understand, are you all over the place or are you not? Are you going to make me feel uncomfortable or emotional or confused about what you've been doing, or are you not? So when you think about this question, I really want you to be focused about how you're going to answer it. I certainly want you to be positive and honest, but more than anything, I want you to remember that people want to hire people who they believe are winners, right? And that is crude and that is weird, but people are looking for winners. And what does a winner look like? A winner looks like somebody who comes out through a challenging time on top. A winner looks like somebody who dealt with everything that they've dealt with in the last year and came out a better professional for it and can compartmentalize even the most challenging things. So although this question is emotionally charged, I want you to think about it as a professional winner and keep it in that context, however tough that might be. Now, next, what motivates you and can you prioritize? We've been all over the place juggling a ton this year, but I want to know, what have you kept afloat? And most importantly, I want a story that I can wrap my head around, not the complex details of everything you've done this year, because I'm sure it has been a lot. So I know you've taken 15 classes. but that makes it seem like you were unfocused. Tell me about the one that meant a lot to you. I know that you've spent a lot of time on your family, and it's fine to mention a little bit and say, well, I really use this time to help my kids in school or to take care of my parents or to whatever the thing is. But the crux of this answer needs to be that compartmentalized, focused story of what did you do? And if a lot of that is exploration, right? And it was, oh, I was trying to understand what markets were like or what industries were like, or a lot of informational interviews, or I met 15,000 people on 80,000 calls. That's fine, but make sure to keep it focused. You've got to make sure that with this answer, as crazy as it might have been, you're the person who was able to manage it all, bring it all together, and really come through with some concise and clear story of this is what I did and why. And that's going to mean cutting out a lot of stuff. That's going to mean cutting out the informational interviews and some of the classes you took and some of the family stuff you did. It might mean cutting out the fact that you learned to run and became a marathoner. But if it's important to you, you can mention it briefly, but make sure the storyline is concise and focused. And the last thing I want to say, that this question is about what brought you here today. If you remember the yellow brick road from the Wizard of Oz, they were on their way to the Emerald City. But to get there, they had to deal with flying monkeys and crazy witches and little goblin-y things. And all that is the same thing that we've been dealing with this past year. But throughout it all, they arrived at the Emerald City. Now you got to use this opportunity to convince me that I am your Emerald City. My company, my role, the honor of working for me or with me or managing me or whatever, that is your Emerald City. So it is super important when you think about this question or any COVID-related question that you lead them on a very clear path of how you have arrived, how and why you have arrived at the Emerald City. What have you learned about yourself that you decided I've got to be doing this thing? What have you learned about an industry or a growth trajectory of a company or a particular skill set or a particular market? What have you learned that now brought you to this Emerald City? And this is the most important part, so I'm going to emphasize this journey, everything you've been on, this is where you say, and this is why I am here now. And that's going to change, obviously, for every company. And you're going to have to think about how to adapt that for every company, because sometimes it's going to be, so what have you done during COVID? Well, at first I started off a little bit lost and I was attending a lot of different talks. And there was one talk that really stuck out to me about how online education is going to be growing. So that talk inspired me and I actually got a certification in digital marketing. And I've been looking for companies that are looking for digital marketers in the education sector. And that's why I came here today, because you guys are leaders in online education. And I believe the digital marketing you're doing is interesting and I can adapt to that, right? That is what I've done, all about this one thing. I'm sure I've done 1,000 other things and gone crazy and none of it was as clean as I just said, but that's the focus, right? If you just finished a boot camp, I know there's a couple people on here who just finished boot camps. And I know you've been thinking, do I want to be a software engineer, UX designer? Do I not? How do I feel about this? Lead me down the yellow brick road to the Emerald City. Well, during COVID, I really took the time to prioritize my education. And I'm really proud of finishing Bootcamp X as a software engineer. And so for the last few months since completing that, I've first been focused on really building up my skills. And I did that by doing projects for a friend's business where I got to build up X, Y, and Z. And then through that, I've discovered a love for this particular language, or I've discovered a love for this industry. And that's what brought me here today, because you guys will allow me to do that really well for you. And I want to be a part of what you're doing as the world changes moving forward. Lead me down the yellow brick road to your Emerald City.